All right, everyone, welcome in. Let's dive right in. You know how The Simpsons is always like weirdly predicting the future?
Yeah, it's pretty wild, right?
We're going to check that out today.
Okay.
We're looking at this YouTube video. It's called Simpsons Prediction for 2025. Is it really happening now? From this channel called Business Hook.
I've seen that one. It's
Yeah. So is it just like clever writing, or are they really seeing the future? Let's find out.
It's definitely interesting how The Simpsons kind of satirizes our world, and sometimes they just nail it years later.
Okay, like perfect example, the Trump orb thing.
You talk about that picture.
Yeah, with Trump and like the king of Saudi Arabia. And
The Egyptian president, yeah.
yeah, they're all like touching this glowing orb. Well, there's a scene from like 2002, I think, where
Right.
Trump is doing the same thing in The Simpsons.
Wow.
Same vibes, surrounded by those Middle Eastern guys, touching the orb. Like, what are the chances?
Yeah. It makes you think, huh? And the orb itself, it's not just a random thing, right? Like, it represents power and decision-making on this global scale. The Simpsons were definitely onto something there, I think.
It's not just a visual gag. There's definitely like a deeper meaning there about power dynamics and stuff. Do you think it's a prediction or just a coincidence?
It's hard to say for sure, but it shows how the writers of the show are really good at tapping into those cultural anxieties.
Yeah.
Whether it was in 2002 or 2017, that orb image, it just taps into that feeling of who's really in control.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, speaking of predictions, let's talk about the big one, Trump becoming president. I remember watching that episode, Bart to the Future, way back when it came out, and I was like, no way, that'll never happen.
Yeah, it was a pretty bold move. I mean, it's like a celebrity businessman with no political experience becoming president.
It's crazy, but then 2016 happened.
Yeah, and everyone was freaking out, like, how did they know?
Right, and the internet, it just blew up. It's even crazier because that same episode predicted a Trump 2024 campaign, and it's happening.
They even had an episode later where they suggest Ivanka Trump might run for president in 2028. I don't know if that one will come true, but it's still wild to think about.
Right. It's like they're not just throwing darts at a board, they're actually hitting something.
They're definitely playing with real ideas and anxieties about American politics, yeah.
Totally. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Artificial intelligence. It's everywhere these days, and it's getting crazy advanced. But there's also that, fear, like, what if it gets too smart?
Yeah, the whole robots taking over thing.
Exactly. The Simpsons actually did an episode about that back in 2016.
Oh, the amusement park one.
Yes. It's like, at first it's all fun and games, right? But then the robots are like, nope, we're in charge now.
It's funny, but kind of scary. Especially now, when AI is getting so advanced, it's like, what if they actually pull the Simpsons on us?
I know. And what's even weirder, right, is that around the same time that episode aired, there were some big AI researchers, like Jürgen Schmidt-Huber, who were starting to publicly warn about the risks of unchecked AI development.
So it wasn't just science fiction. There were real experts saying, hey, we got to be careful here.
Crazy. So do you think it's a coincidence? Or did The Simpsons tap into something deeper, about the future of AI?
It's a tough question. It makes you wonder if, maybe our collective fears and anxieties about AI, like the kind we see in sci-fi, maybe they're actually influencing how AI develops. Like maybe by imagining those fears, we're pushing ourselves to create safeguards and ethical guidelines to prevent those things from happening.
Oh, wow. That's deep. Maybe we're shaping the future with our imaginations.
It's a possibility. We give stories a lot of power, don't we?
Okay, let's lighten things up for a minute. Remember that Simpsons episode with the baby translator? It seemed like pure science fiction at the time.
No, it was a classic.
But guess what? Researchers are working on tech that can actually analyze baby sounds and figure out what they mean.
Wow. So no more guessing games with your little one.
Right. Imagine. No more like, is he hungry? Is he tired? What does he want? You just look at the device and it tells you.
That would change parenting forever. But I wonder, would we become too reliant on it? Like, would it stop us from developing that natural intuition and connection with our babies?
Yeah, good point. It's like every new technology has its pros and cons.
It's true. But I think that's what The Simpsons does so well. They throw these crazy ideas at us, but they also make us think about the consequences, both good and bad.
Totally. Speaking of crazy ideas becoming reality, remember that episode? It was like a Treehouse of Horror thing where Homer and Marge are eating virtual food. They've got those VR headsets on and they're chowing down.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Well, guess what? Now, there are companies like Samsung actually developing immersive VR dining experiences. They're testing them on cruise ships.
Wow. So virtual steak and potatoes might be on the menu sooner than we think.
It's mind-blowing, right? I don't know if I could ever trade a real juicy burger for a virtual one.
Right. Like it makes you think about what food really is. Is it just
Yeah.
about taste and filling your stomach, or is there something more to it?
Totally. Okay, one more tech prediction that's starting to look less like science fiction and more like, actual science. Remember the Simpsons episode with the holographic invitation?
Uh-huh.
It's happening. Hologram technology is getting super advanced. There's this device called Drobo that can create some crazy 3D projections.
Imagine that instead of just a video call, you could have a 3D hologram of someone right there in your living room.
That would change everything, like
Hmm.
remote work, education, even just hanging out with friends and family who live far
It would
away.
be so much more immersive and personal.
Totally. Okay, now for something a little darker. Subliminal messaging. Do you remember that episode where a boy band's hit song has hidden messages that brainwash people into joining the Navy?
Yeah, I remember that one.
Okay, so maybe a song can't brainwash you into joining the Navy, but the idea of using music for propaganda and persuasion, it's not new, right?
No, think about like war anthems or political campaign songs.
Mm,
Music can definitely influence our emotions and behavior.
totally. But how susceptible are we to those kinds of subtle messages? Even if we don't realize they're there. It's a bit creepy to think about, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly bombarded with information. It's impossible to be aware of everything that's influencing us?
It's true. It's like we're swimming in a sea of information, and we don't always know what's lurking beneath the surface.
And that's why it's so important to think critically about the messages we're receiving. Be media literate, question things.
Yeah, totally. Okay, let's talk about a prediction that unfortunately wasn't so funny when it became reality: pandemics. Back in 1993, The Simpsons had this episode called Margin Chains, where Springfield gets hit with a massive flu pandemic.
Oh, yeah, and it was like eerily similar to what we went through with COVID-19.
I know, right? They had the panic buying, the social distancing, even the way the virus spread through random objects. It's like they were looking into the future.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that those kinds of global threats, they're not just science fiction. They're real things we have to be prepared for.
Okay, let's end this part on a slightly more positive note, shall we? Remember that Simpsons episode with flying cars? Like, they're just as common as bicycles in that
I
episode.
love that episode.
Me too. And you know what? It might not be as far-fetched as we think. There's this company, Samson Sky, and they're actually making flying cars. They even did a test flight recently.
Really? That's amazing.
I know. So are we going to be stuck in traffic jams in the sky soon?
Well, there's still some hurdles. Like, they're pretty expensive. I think they're going to cost around $170,000.
Yeah. So maybe not for everyone just yet. But who knows? Maybe one day we'll all be zipping around in our flying cars.
Definitely a cool thought.
So are the Simpsons predictions just lucky guesses? Or are they tapping into something deeper? We'll be right back to explore that more.
Welcome back, everyone. It's amazing how The Simpsons can be so funny and also kind of scary with all these predictions about the future.
Right. It's like they're showing us these really dark possibilities, but they're making us laugh about it at the same time.
Exactly. And one thing that really stands out to me is how resilient the characters are. Even when things get super crazy in Springfield, they always seem to bounce back.
Yeah, like Marge, she never loses her hope, no matter what's going on.
She's the heart of the show. Always there with a kind word and a smile, even when the world's falling apart around her.
And then there's Lisa. She's always fighting for what she believes in, even when everyone else thinks she's crazy.
She's like the voice of reason, always using her intelligence and passion to make things better.
It's inspiring, right? Like, even in the face of all this chaos and potential doom, they show us that there's still hope.
It's a good reminder that even when things seem bleak, we can still choose to be optimistic and fight for a better future.
So do you think that's part of the show's magic? That they can make us laugh at our anxieties while also reminding us that, the human spirit is pretty strong.
I think so, yeah. They tap into the whole range of human emotions.
Hmm.
The good, the bad, the funny, the scary. That's why it resonates with so many people.
Okay, I want to throw something out there that's been kind of bugging me. You know that prediction in the video about World War III? It hasn't happened yet, thankfully, but given everything that's going on in the world right now, it feels a little too close for comfort?
Yeah, it definitely hits different now. I mean, The Simpsons often use humor to kind of deal with these anxieties.
Right.
Like, they're making fun of it to make it less scary.
Right.
But sometimes reality catches up with the joke, and it's like, uh-oh, this isn't so funny anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It makes you wonder, are they just really good at guessing? Or are they like tapping into something deeper, something about the human condition and where we're headed as a society?
It's a fascinating question. Are they just incredibly perceptive writers? Or is there something more intuitive going on? Like maybe they're picking up on these subconscious fears and anxieties that we all share.
Yeah, it's like they're holding up this distorted mirror, and somehow the reflection ends up being more accurate than we expected. It's pretty mind-blowing.
What's really interesting to me is that whether these predictions are intentional or not, they get people talking. They challenge us to think critically about the world.
That's a great point. It's not just entertainment. It's like cultural commentary that sparks these big conversations about society, technology, the future. It makes you think, if The Simpsons is that distorted mirror, what does it tell us about where we are right now? What choices are we making?
Yeah, and where are those choices leading us? It's a question we all have to grapple with. But maybe the most important message is that we have the power to change things. We're not just stuck on some predetermined path.
I love that. It's not about just accepting these predictions as, like, destiny. It's about being aware of the possibilities, the good and the bad, and then using that knowledge to make better choices.
Exactly. It's about turning those anxieties into action, using those warnings as opportunities to create a better future.
So maybe instead of fearing the future, we should focus on shaping it. Maybe the real power of The Simpsons isn't about predicting what will happen, but about inspiring us to think about what kind of future we want and how we can work together to make it a reality.
I think that's a powerful message. It's about turning those satirical jabs into opportunities for positive change.
You know, it's crazy to think The Simpsons has been on for like over 30 years and it's still so relevant. It's like they have this timeless quality. What do you think is their secret?
I think it's that combination of humor, social commentary, and heart. They make us laugh at ourselves, they challenge our assumptions, but they also remind us that there's still good in the world, even in the face of absurdity.
Yeah, and maybe that's the key to navigating the future, approaching it with a mix of critical thinking, skepticism, and a good sense of humor.
I think you're right. And who knows, maybe we'll be able to look back at some of these predictions and laugh, saying, wow, we dodged that one.
Fingers crossed. But seriously, I think this deep dive has shown how powerful satire, storytelling, and imagination can be. They shape how we see the world and our place in it.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that the future isn't set in stone. We have the power to create it.
And on that inspiring note, let's take one final break before we wrap up our deep dive. All right, we're back. And, thinking about all these predictions, like, the Simpsons are making fun of us, but they're also kind of, like, spot on about human nature.
Yeah, it's that mix of humor and, like, real social commentary that makes it so good. They're not afraid to point out our flaws, but they do it in a way that makes you laugh.
Totally. Which brings us to something we've touched on a few times, this whole apocalyptic thing.
Yeah, like the world's gonna end.
Yeah. Rogue AI, pandemics, like total societal collapse. It's kind of wild.
It's definitely the Simpsons style to throw in some good old apocalyptic humor. Right. But those scenarios, even if they seem crazy, I think they reflect real anxieties people have about the future.
Totally. It's like those fears we all have about things going completely wrong. They put those on screen, but in this funny, exaggerated way.
Yeah, it's almost like by making fun of it, they're helping us deal with those anxieties.
Yeah, maybe. There's this one episode I'm thinking of where everything in Springfield just like falls apart. It's total chaos.
With the looting and riots and everything.
Yeah. It's hilarious, but also kind of scary because it's like, is that how easily things could fall apart in real life?
Right. It shows how fragile things can be, even when we think everything's stable and under control.
So are they trying to warn us with these apocalyptic episodes? Or are they just poking fun at our fears?
I think it's a bit of both. They're playing on those fears, for sure. But it also makes you stop and think like, hey, what can we do to avoid this kind of stuff happening in real life?
It's like a wake-up call, but like a funny one. So maybe The Simpsons aren't actually predicting the future. Maybe they're just showing us what could happen if we don't, like, pay attention and make some changes.
Yeah, exactly. It's about taking those warnings and turning them into action, into something positive.
So the takeaway isn't that we're all doomed, right? It's that we have the power to choose a different path, to learn from our mistakes and build a better future.
I love that. It's not about accepting some predetermined fate. It's about recognizing that we have a say in how things turn out.
Well said. So we've reached the end of our deep dive into The Simpsons and their crazy predictions. It's been I don't know, a bit of a roller coaster, lots of laughs, some deep thoughts, and maybe a touch of like, oh no, what if this really
It's
happens?
been great talking about all this with you. I hope it's given our listeners something to think about.
Me too. Whether you believe in the predictions or not, you gotta admit, The Simpsons has a way of making you laugh, think, and ask those big questions about the world.
Absolutely. And those questions, they're important. They can help us create a better future.
Couldn't agree more. So, to everyone listening out there, keep watching, keep thinking, and don't be afraid to imagine the possibilities. We have the power to shape the future.
And hey, who knows? Maybe The Simpsons will give us a few more hints along the way.
That's right. Until next time, everyone.